Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video. Today we're going to do a should you poll on the Queen and Ignis banners. So in this video, I do go like more in depth on these, these poll videos. It's not just like should you pull the characters, but I do like to talk a little bit about maybe what spheres you want to hold on to for, which EXs you want to hold on to for specific spheres, if there's any good spheres here, and then if any of the LDs are worth grabbing for the calls, right? So we'll start with spheres, and then talk about if any calls are worth it, right? In terms of spheres, I think the most notable sphere here is Queen. Queen's got a really nice D sphere with a party attack up, which is very good. But then other than that, none of the other spheres were really crazy notable. I mean, like Shadow's got a decent attack one, but it's on single target, so it's like not every character can use it, but it is a 10% attack. So Shadow can definitely be useful on some characters. But a lot of the spheres here are like max brave ones, which aren't, they're not as high need. Like, you don't need to worry about those. There are not as many characters that, like, always want just Max Brave. Typically, you want attack and Max Brave. But there are characters like Astos that like pure Max Brave spheres. But nothing I think you need to go too crazy about, right? Now, in terms of calls, I think, like, the Queen, the side batters here on Queen are actually some pretty solid calls. Quistis is, like, a super uber mega delay character, so her call has delays on both buttons, so if you just need like an on-demand delay for whatever reason, Quistis call can be useful for that. I think Fran call is maybe one of the better calls in the game. I actually really like Fran call, and maybe I'm a little bit biased because she's kind of one of my go-to calls. But she puts a really impressive debuff down with her call called Vieira's Punishment, and it does do it with both buttons. Now, it is a stacking debuff, so you want to make sure that you get the stacks up on it, but Vieira's Punishment is one debuff slot that has essentially 9 debuffs inside of it. It does a lot, including a 30% HP damage up. Now, once again, you've got to get Vieira's Punishment up to 10 stacks, but it's a really, really nice debuff and it has a lot packed into it. And Fran, honestly, has always been pretty trash in the party. I hate to say it because I think Fran's a cool character and I want her to be good. But up until this point, she really hasn't been that good in the party, but her call has always had a lot of value. So that's the most value I've gotten out of Fran is the call. I don't know that like Fran or Quistis are worth chasing their calls. Like they're not that impactful that you have to have them. But I would say if you decide to summon over here on Queen and you get that Fran LD, that's definitely a nice call you just picked up. On the other side here, Ignis has a notable call because it is a party fire enchant, and that's not a very common thing. I think him and Lulu might be the only ways to get that, because I don't even know if Neon's call does fire enchant. It might, but I know for the longest time it was really Ignis and Lulu were the main calls you'd use for fire enchant. So his is just notable that if you need that fire enchant, it's there. But otherwise, like Sarah just throws some debuffs down, but nothing too crazy, right? So really, there isn't really anything, I think, chaseable here in terms of calls. And then for spheres, once again, if you get like Queen Sphere, that's like a nice sphere you could get. In terms of Queen as a character, we'll look at this banner here as for should you summon for these characters. And when I look at a character like Quistis, just so you know, each banner, I think kind of moving forward, the banners are going to have like BTFR characters on the side. But in terms of should you pull, I'm going to treat them as LD only because you don't have access to the BTFRs here. So even though Quistis has a BT and FR, you can't get it here. So I wouldn't recommend pulling for her, looking at her in that way, right? Now, is Quistis worth pulling for as an LD only character? I mean, she is solid still LD only because you do get the mega delay, which is like really the reason you'd want to run her. But obviously to use her at full effectiveness, you want the BTFR, which you're not going to get access to here. So Quistis is like a decent character LD only, but not a character you need to chase, right? And as I said before, Fran is actually pretty doo-doo in the party. She's also like a debuff-based character. Does a very unique ranged damage up. So if you wanted to do like full ranged comps, and like with characters like Fujin and Yuffie, like there's some nice, and Cisne, there actually is some nice ranged characters right now. That is nice, but like Fran not really worth running. Now you could put, like if you wanted to have a bunch of ranged damage dealers, you could put Fran's call on and you can apply that ranged, that ranged weakness damage down if you wanted to have that, but it's not like a huge deal, right? So I think Quistis, Fran, both very skippable here. You don't really need to worry about them. And then Queen, I also think Queen is a skip. I think this whole banner is pretty much a skip. Queen is a nice character. The thing with Queen, it's kind of crazy. We're getting her rerun, I feel like, very soon. And I think that's just partly due to the fact that global's moving very quickly. But Queen just got her BTFR in August. And here we are, about 2 months later, already getting a rerun, which I feel like it's pretty fast for a rerun. Queen is kind of an interesting character in that they kind of treat her like a damage dealer, but she's also got a lot of battery and healing, so she's kind of like one of these in-between characters. Kind of reminds me of Jill a little bit, just in the fact that I kind of see Jill as like one of these supportish characters, but also can deal a solid amount of damage. The thing I don't like about Queen is, even though Queen can do some good things, she kind of goes into a rage mode where she gets locked into her HP attacks, which can be inconvenient because, like, let's say you like having Queen for the healing and battery and all that, and then you're in this rage mode where she's doing her damage, but then you get locked out of, like, what if I want to do her FR or BT? Like, you can't press certain buttons when maybe you want to do it, and that part can get a little frustrating. If you're, if you really understand Queen though, and you can plan out the fight so that your buttons will be available when you want them. But I think just for me that when I'm playing Queen, I don't feel like as free when I'm playing her, because I do get at times locked into certain buttons, and I'm not a fan of when characters do that. And in terms of what Queen is trying to do, which is battery, healing, and damage, there are characters that do all of those things much better than her. So I really don't think Queen is anybody you need to be chasing right now, especially in terms of, like, if you're thinking of Queen as a support healer. We already talked about on the monthly pull plan that this is the month of supports, and there are some insane supports coming, and actually one on the other banner we're going to talk about. So you definitely don't need to summon Queen. Now, a reason you might want to grab her is if you want to do the Leonora cheese. We talked about this earlier, but we got Leonora. If you're willing to pair Leonora with Maria, Queen is a character that depletes her own health, which would allow you to do the Leonora Maria strat for the heavy gains. So if you want Queen as an option to help you do that, then she might actually be worth picking up, because I would rather use Queen than, say, a character like Arden, who's a little bit more dated right now. So if you want a character that's going to be like, yep, I'm going to stab myself down to like 1 HP, but then I can't die, but then Leonora's going to allow me to heal and get huge gains, you could use Queen for that for sure. But in either case, I would recommend most players probably stay away from this banner. Then we have the Ignis banner, which we've got Shadow and Sarah. Once again, Sarah, I like her a lot as a BTFR character. She doesn't have force charging, which is, I guess, one of her negatives. But I would consider Sarah, I think of her as a support, but in reality, she is kind of one of these dual-role characters where she really is a support and a debuffer. And I think debuffing is a really big part of Sarah's kit. So if you like debuffing strats, like, Sarah is definitely solid, especially if you're going to run her with a character like Vincent and maybe throw Vera's Punishment down and load up on some really heavy debuffs. Like, Sarah can be a good part of that. And with her BT, like, she does get nice follow-ups and everything. With Lightning, by the way, which is very cool. But once again, we've got to treat Sarah here as LD only. And if this even was Sarah BTFR, once again, I look at her for, like, her support stuff. And, like, the other characters are just too good. So Sarah is a character you don't really need to worry about. Shadow as well, as much as I love him, he's got a cool kit. He's pretty much a damage dealer. And he isn't really dealing enough damage as an LD only character to warrant chasing. I would say Shadow is a character too that's kind of been very irrelevant during Force, because he's one of these speedy characters. He steals turns. He has a cool kit because he does this thing where, like, he can evade and then he, like, steals a bunch of turns, which is really cool. Kind of like Layla, but it's just for himself. But he's just someone that needs his upgrades, right? But I would say Retain era is definitely the era for Shadow, because now he can steal his turns, and because we have Retain, we don't have to worry about losing as much damage with him stealing all the turns, right? But Sarah and Shadow both, neither are worth chasing for any reason. Then we have Ignis. And I talked about Ignis on the monthly pull planning video, and I would call Ignis like a very high priority pull this month if you need support, right? And I did refer to him in the monthly pull planning as probably the must pull of the month, in my opinion. Now, even though I say, like, must pull of the month, it doesn't truly mean he's not, like, mega must pull, like, say, when Aerith first dropped, or, like, when Rubicante first dropped, because those were, like, mega, like, yes, every player needs to get them. I would say not every player needs to get Ignis, but I'm saying when I'm looking at all the characters this month, he seems to be the highest priority for me on paper, looking at, like, a really, really nice character. Now, if you've already got a bunch of top-tier recent supports, You know, you've got your Aerith, Rosa, Garnets, whatever. You've got all these like nice Echo. You know, you've got Lena, you've got Rem, you've got Iris. Like, there's a lot of good support characters out there. So if you have a situation like me where I've got all those, like, you definitely don't need to pull Ignis. But I would say Ignis to me seems like one of the, like, him and Arciela, I feel like are like the two nicest characters this month, like maybe the highest priority ones. So to summarize what Ignis is doing, he's got debuff evasion, which if you guys watch my top 5 support list, debuff evasion was enough for me to put Lena in my top 5, even though she doesn't have force charging. That's how highly I rank the debuff evasion. Well, now Ignis has it and he can force charge. So he's like doing that while making up for maybe that thing that Lena didn't have. He does force charge. He's interesting where his force charge, I would say it's a little less consistent than maybe some other characters, because he's like a stance-based character, right? So he'll do like a force charge to like go into a stance, and then he does these HP plus attacks within the stance, and then you could do like his burst heal, which would be like another force charge, and he can get him out of the stance, and then you can force charge back into a stance. But he's a little bit different in how he works because he's stance-based, and I can get if that maybe throws some players off. He's not as straightforward, whereas like if you just use Aerith, you're like ramp, 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 press buttons, do things, whatever. You got to think a little bit more with Ignis because you want to look at your stances and how many skill uses, but you can very freely go back and forth between the stances, and that's fine if you want to do that, right? And debuff evasion comes from one of the stances. But he's got tons of healing. He's got tons of brave gains. He can do brave gaining by setting the value, so it, you know, brave gain reduction won't hit him as hard because he can set value of brave instead of just gaining brave. He's got turn manipulation on his EX, which is kind of cool. Brave poison, HP damage resist down to the enemies, which makes it so you do more HP damage. His BT, like kind of the trend they've been doing with a lot of these support characters, his BT does give him follow-ups that really give him some decent damage. And I think the reason ultimately, guys, why I'm ranking Ignis so high is FR conditions. And you guys saw this with how I've used and how I've talked about Rosa. FR condition is such a huge important thing in this game because, as I talked about with Rosa, this is a character that for team building, she makes you very flexible because you don't have to team build around a FR. When your condition is so free that every character hits it, it opens up team building so much. Whereas if I say wanted to do a character like, say, Yuna's got some really nice free conditions, but if you want to get her full conditions, you have to do HP plus attacks. Well, you'd want to kind of team build around having good HP plus attacks. Ignis now falls into kind of this Rosa category where it's basically free for any character in the game. Because his conditions are just not having debuffs, and he has debuff evasion to make it so you don't have that, and you just have to have full HP. Every character in the game is capable of not being debuffed and having full HP. So if you have Ignis, and let's say you don't have Rosa, then I would say someone like Ignis adds even more value, because now I think every player should have in their box what I would call like a free and easy FR like Ignis, where you know that whatever team you're trying to put together, maybe you're putting two characters that are very wonky and their FRs would be terrible together, but any Echo can be good if you have a good leading FR, and thus you can put any team together with a character like Ignis because every character is going to echo well when you're meeting an 80% condition for free. And what's nice about Ignis is the other thing I really like about, say, Rosa, where it's a condition where you don't necessarily have to attack to get the gains. Because if you have no debuffs and you have full HP, it doesn't require you to hit a target. So what this means is a character like Aerith will echo for 160. Traditional attacking echoes will tick for 100%. So you're getting max gains all around the board no matter what character you're having. And ultimately, I think that is the highest value that Ignis brings, is having that insane FR condition with the debuff evasion while doing all of the normal support things you want. Brave gain, force charge, heal, right? He is just a really nice character. And what I'm going to say, guys, is if you look at your box and you don't have like that super free FR condition, I think you do need to pick this man up. I want everybody to have the joy of having like the free and easy. We'll call it the Rosa effect because I guess she's the character I've showcased with it the most. But I mean, Penelo has had it. I praised Penelo so much ever since Anniversary. She's still usable to this day because of her free force condition. Any of these characters that basically them existing in the party makes your force condition work, it's just so good because like I said, you just run anybody with them. So you're gonna have to look at your box. So I'm gonna say like he's as must pull as you can get this month based on the characters we've seen. There are players that definitely won't need Ignis. You're gonna have to evaluate your roster and see. But if you're missing like a big time, like if you're missing a premium new support character, or you're missing what we'd call the Rosa effect, that free FR, I would pick this man up. You're gonna enjoy it. And I think he's going to do some really good things for you. So anyways, guys, let me know if you're going to pull or not. By the way, I am pulling for Ignis. We're going to max this man out. I want to show him off. Thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all on the next one.